everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar where we're looking at mastering the basics and we're diving into creating and editing simple fields and pick lists. Now, I'm sure you know by now, my name is Milo. I'm one of the customer support analysts here at Workbooks, and I'm going to be leading you through today's journey. So before we do start that, as you know, we do have our webinars, and on the screen, what I've got is just a quick rundown of the webinars that we have planning going forward. So you can see that our next one will be looking at dynamic linked items and creating them. But that's for the future. Let's get on to what we're doing today. So the agenda for today is that we're going to be looking at what fields are and some of the different types of fields. I'm going to be showing you guys how to create new fields and also how to create pick lists and edit those pick lists. So to get started, let's actually jump straight into Workbooks. Now, on the screen, you can see that we've got the record for Alan Whitehead. And on here, we've got all of our different fields where you can see that we've got text fields for the name, we've got an email field, and you can even see that for the title, we've got this as a pick list. And for the interests, we've also got what we call a multi-select pick list. We've also got the date of birth field. So you can see that we've got lots of different types of fields. Now, something to remember with these is if you would need to make sure that you enter data correctly depending on the type of field that you've actually got. And a good example of this is actually if we look at the email, which is what we call an email field, that if I went ahead and started to create a new person, and I'll just quickly put in a name, and I put in literally something that we all know is not an email address, but type in an email address and try to save this, you can see that it's not actually letting me do that. And that's what I mean by trying to remember that information needs to be entered in the correct way for the different fields. So let me just discard this. Now that you've got an idea of what fields are and these things that you use every day, let's start looking at how we actually create a field. So to start to create a field, I'm going to take my cursor and go to the Workbooks icon, go down to the configuration, and here I'm going to go to my customization, and I'm going to select record types. Now this gives me all of the records that you've got available to you. Most of these will be familiar to you, and you may see one or two that you may not have on your database, but the steps are still the same. So I'm going to start by creating a field on a sales lead. So I've clicked sales lead, and I now need to go to my fields tab. On the fields tab, you can see that it lists all of the different fields that we've already got, where we've got their field labels, the field names, and for data type, it's saying what type of field it is. One thing to point out here is if I look at my insight fields, you can see that these have a field name that start with CF, and also in the field type, you can see that it says custom. This indicates to us that these are fields that we have created ourselves. They're not standard fields. And any new field that you create would be known as a custom field. So let's start by looking at how we'd create one. Obviously, we've got our option of new custom field, and we have a list of all the different types of fields we've got. Where, as you can see, we've got email address, we've got a phone number, But the one I'm going to pick is I'm going to pick one that's for date. So when I select date, I would need to give this a field label. Now, the date field that I want to create is a date field that we can enter to say when this person was first in contact with us. So I'm going to give it a name of date of contact. A useful thing to remember is when you are creating new fields, to try and give the field label something that is specific. Because while you can have fields that have the same label, when you're trying to use them for either reporting or trying to, or even an import, if you've got two fields of the same name, you may be confused as to which one you need to do. Now, while creating a field, I have the option of show by default, which I'm going to leave selected. And if I wanted to, I could put in a default value. A couple of other options that we have here are where we've got required and read only. Now, required means that this information has to be entered. And it means that the record cannot be saved if it hasn't actually been entered. And similar with read only, it means that the information is displayed, but it can't be edited. Now, with both of these, you do have the option to set them as required or read only here. But if you do that, you're setting it as these on what we call a record level, which means that they always have to be required. They're always required or they're always read only. I would often try and steer away from setting fields as required or read only on a record level. And this is something that you would need to set on a form layout level. And that's something that we'll actually be covering in one of our future webinars. Now, you can also see that I've got the option to show in grid, which means that when I'm on a landing page, I can show the value. And those are the main key things here with setting up a new field. So I'm going to press save and close. And when we have a look at our list, you can see that we've got date of contact, but it's grayed out, which tells me that in the background, it's being created. And this will take a couple of moments. So rather than let us actually wait around, I actually want to show you guys the next step. And we can come back to it once it's been created, and you'll know when it is because I'll get a notification. So while that's being created, I want to quickly move on to pick lists. Now, pick lists are very useful. Pick lists, you would have your set values and you can select which one you want. And they're fairly straightforward to create. Now, to create a pick list, again, if I go to my Workbooks icon, go down to the configuration, and you can see that I just had the notification appear to say that my previous field was done. But as I was saying, if I go to configuration, again, to customization, and I go to pick lists, you can see a list of all pick lists that have already been created. Now, rather than creating new ones, I would always advise check here, see if there's one that you can use rather than creating a new one. But if you did want to create a new one, it's straightforward. You've got the option here, new pick list. And when this comes up, I would obviously need to give it a name. Now, the pick list I want to create today is just a simple hobbies field. So I'm going to call it hobbies. And before I move on to adding what I want in the pick list, I just want to point out we've got a couple of options here. The first option we've got is unrestricted. Now, having a pick list as unrestricted means that while there are still values in there, you're also able to add additional ones. That can be useful in certain situations, but there are times when it could not show you the correct representation of data. An example of this is if I just pause this for a moment and go back to my record of Alan Whitehead, you'll see that for the title, I've got Mr. And even though it is a pick list with the dropdown, it's got a little plus to say that it's unrestricted. So while I can add in my values here, I could add in an additional value and save it, and it would still show there. So the reason why this would be a disadvantage is if you have people entering values into an unrestricted pick list and it's a new value, yes, you'd be able to report on it. But if we look at this report that I built earlier that looks at all of the titles on people records, you can see that I've got some where I've got Mr. or Mr. with a full stop at the end. And this just adds up. So from a reporting point of view, it can cause a little bit of confusion. But I've digressed a little bit. So let's go back to where I was. As I said, I'm at the moment going back to creating a custom pick list. And I've spoken about how you can make it unrestricted. The other option that you've got is you can sort the information alphabetically. And I am going to select that this time. Next, I'll obviously want to add my values. So to do that, I need to go to the values tab at the top. And while I have nothing here to add it, I would just go add at the top. And this gives me a nice text box where I can start typing in my values. Now you can type in your values. You just need to make sure that for each new value, it needs to be on a new line. So if I wanted to, I could start by typing in walking, and then I'd press enter, put a new line, and put in my next value. Something else that's particularly useful is I can also copy and I can also paste values into here. So off screen, I've got a list of hobbies that I want to add. So I'm just going to paste those in. And you can see that they're all on a new line. So when I go save and close, we can see all of my values added there. If I go back to my main and quickly save this, we can see that we have the 7 values there. Now, if you want to come back to a pick list and add a new value, it's fairly straightforward to do. You would again just go to your values and just go add and type in a new one. Once you do and save that, it will appear in the list there for you. So now that I've got all of my values on there, I'm going to save and close this. And I'm going to look into actually creating a pick list field. So for this, again, I'd go to the workbook symbol and go to my configuration. And then customization, record types. And again, I'm going to add it onto a sales lead. So again, I'd go into my fields and I'd start to look into adding my new custom field. Now, usually in this sort of time, I would need to think about what type of field do I want to add. And the obvious choice would be to pick a pick list field, where if I did this, it would open up, I'd be given the option to add there, to add the name for it, and I could say which pick list it is that I want to add. Now, I'm looking into adding a hobbies field. The question I'd ask myself is, do people generally have one hobby, or would they have multiple hobbies? Now, usually people would have multiple hobbies, so I don't actually want to add a pick list field. What I want to add is what we call a multi-select field. And this, when created, allows you to actually select multiple values from that pick list. So I'm going to give it a field label of hobbies. For my selections, I'm going to add the new pick list that I've just created, and I'm going to save and close that. And what will happen is in the background, that will go ahead and create just like the other one, which should be done shortly. But as we can see here, it is grayed out, which that will be updated shortly. But for the moment, let me close this. And what I want to quickly do is just open a sales lead so that we can actually see the fields that have been created. So I've just opened up a sales lead. And when I scroll down to the bottom, we can see that my date of contact field has appeared there. And shortly, when my multi-select picks list field is finished creating, that would also appear just underneath it. Now, when you do add new fields, you would obviously want to have a little bit of control of where they are and where they're placed and grouped with what other fields. That's something that will be covered in our form layouts webinar, which we'll have in a couple of sessions time. And we'll go through the details of how you would do all that. Now, there is one other pick list that you may want to look into editing, and that is for opportunity stages. Now, opportunity stages, the way that we've changed this is slightly different. So if I go to my start menu and go back into configuration, and now I've got the notification about my hobbies field being created. But if I go into the configuration, again, customization and record types, and select opportunities, here you can see that I've actually got the tab of opportunity stages, which this lists off all of those stages. And slightly different to a normal pick list, this also allows you to do an associated state, meaning is the opportunity open or is the opportunity closed? And we can also map a forecast status and a probability as well. If you want to add a new stage, you would simply go new opportunity stage. You would type in what you want that stage to be. So I'm going to start to do this. I know there is one called Lost, but I'm just showing this as an example. And then for the stage map to probability, I'd have the option to select what percentage I wanted. For the forecast status, again, I can add that. For the order is where I want it to appear in there, which I know that there are other ones. So this, I want this to be the 8th, and I can set my associated record state. So whether I want it to be open or closed. And if I wanted to, I would go ahead and save and close that. But I'm not going to on this one. Now, something else that you can certainly do here is if you want to make a change to any of these, you certainly can. What you'd simply do is click on the one that you want to change. You've got your option to edit the name, change the probability, change the order, and change the record state. And this is particularly useful that if you've suddenly had a new opportunity stage that's needed to be created, you can certainly add it, or you may want to edit the names of the current ones that you've got. And that's how you would change the opportunity stages. Now, while I was demonstrating that, we saw that my new field had been created. So let me just show that again. And we can see down here at the bottom, hobbies has been created, and I have the option to select multiple ones. And there we go. That is how you would create and edit fields and pick lists. So let's just quickly recap. Now, when you are creating or editing fields, you do need to think about what type of data you're wanting to store in them. Is it something where you need an email field, or is it something that could just be a text field? When you're thinking of creating pick lists, it's useful to create the pick list before creating the pick list field that you want so that you can add it in there. And more importantly, you should always consider if a field should be required or read-only on a record level, or if it needs to be done on a form layout level. So let's see if we've got any questions. So it doesn't appear that I've got any questions at the moment, but I just want to see if anyone suddenly thinks of something and starts frantically typing away. Now, I've had a question come in. Why doesn't my field appear on the form? So for this question, I presume meaning that you've just created a new field, but it's not appearing when you open the record. Usually the reason why a field wouldn't appear, even if you do have that display by default, and just to show you what I mean by that, that when I go back into my configuration, do this quickly, that when I'm creating a new field, you can see that I do have that show by default value picked. If you do have it picked and it's still not appearing, that may be because where that field is being created on the record could be in what we call a hidden section. And we'll go into sections more when we're looking at form layouts, but that would be the reason why it may not appear to begin with. But that appears to be the only question that we've got. Oh, how do I choose which section of the form the field drops into? That's a good question, Sam. Again, that's something that we will cover when we're looking at form layouts. That by default, a new field will go into a section generally called custom. And depending on how the form layout's being set up, that section may be hidden. So you'd need to go in and edit the form layout to where you'd want it to be. But that appears to be it. So I want to thank you all for joining. Hopefully you'll be able to join us on our next webinar on the 28th of February, where we're going to be looking into creating dynamic linked items, or as we call DLIs. But till then, if you do have questions, we advise that you check our knowledge base first, and just seeing if you can find the answer there. But if you can't, and you're an authorized support contact, please email us here on support or use the case portal. Alternatively, you can reach out to your account manager and they'll be able to help. We do also have multiple recordings on our website showing this, and you can also catch up on past webinars by going onto the Workbooks website, going down to resources, and then you just select webinar recordings. But I want to thank you all for attending, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.